Parshas Ki Sisa, Tov Shin Pei Daled. Want to welcome everybody back to our Nesivos Shalom share Thursday night. Thank you to all the special guests for being here tonight. The Parsha of Ki Sisa, the beginning of the Parsha, speaks about the mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel. And one of the nice things, I was thinking about it while preparing this week's shir, that one of the nice things about studying and delving into this subject of Machzis HaShekel is the fact that next week is Parshas Shkolem. Next week we begin, unbelievably so, the Arba Parshios that we read, the extra Parshios, 4 of them, which take us up to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So Pesach is right around the corner. I don't mean to alarm anyone who has to clean for Pesach or prepare for Pesach. But we all know in our shir we prepare in a different way. We prepare for Shabbosos, we prepare for the Yom Tovim, we prepare in a very spiritual way. And the fact is, now that next week is Parshas Shkolem, and this week is Parshas Ki Sisa, so speaking about the Machzis HaShekel will give us a lesson that can last us really for 2 weeks, something that we can internalize and something to think about. The Gemara tells us, Masechta Baba Basra, Daf Yud Amid Beis, that Moshe Rabbeinu asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, and he said the following, Rabbeinu Shalom, Ba'amet Torum Keren Yisrael, how will we lift up, how will we lift and raise the status of Klal Yisrael? And the Gemara tells us that Hashem answered to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem answered, you know how you're going to lift up Keren Yisrael? You know how you're going to lift up Klal Yisrael? B'Ki Sisa. With Ki Sisa. Okay, the question, of course, is what exactly Ki Sisa means. Ki Sisa, we're referring to the Machzis HaShekel. How is it and why is it that the mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel specifically lifts up the status of Bnei Yisrael? What does it do for a Yid? What does the mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel have unique, that because of that and through that we lift up the Keren Yisrael, especially since if you think about it, practically speaking, it would seem that this is a pretty simple mitzvah. This mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel, not only is it simple, I mean, it doesn't take much, right, to give a Machzis HaShekel, not much effort involved, and even more so because you're actually giving a very small amount. You're not even giving a shekel. You're giving a half a shekel. You're giving a Machzis HaShekel. And yet we say this mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel uplifts Keren Yisrael. And that was the answer to Moshe Rabbeinu, that there's something in this mitzvah will uplift Klal Yisrael. So the Nesivos Shalom wants to explain Al Pi HaAvoda in the classic way of the Nesivos Shalom, and he wants to explain based on the question. Let's understand this question that Moshe Rabbeinu asked. Ba'amet Torum Keren Yisrael. What does the question actually mean? So the Nesivos Shalom tells us that we need to think about for a moment that a Jew, every Yid, we come to this world, and when we come to this world, we spend most of our time, we're busy with pursuits, physical pursuits of Gashmias, and we have to do them. We eat, we drink, and I'm not talking about the drinking of alcoholic beverages. That's another subject. We're not even discussing that. I'm talking about drinking water, drinking for sustenance. So we eat, we drink, we take time to raise children, we take time to make a living. So much of our time is spent with mundane, physical, gashmias pursuits. And quite honestly, if we're honest with ourselves, we know that all these actions and every one of these actions and physical activities that we do, they take time and they take energy and they draw us away from what we really have to pursue in this world. They draw us away from Avodas Hashem. And of course, we're not saying you shouldn't do them. You have to do these things. Hashem set up the world that we have to do these things in order to survive. But the fact is that they distract us and they take us off the path of Avodas Hashem. So listen to what Nesivos Shalom says. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu is asking a question. He's asking if we need to be busy with all of these things. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, you set up the world that we're busy with all these physical activities. Then Moshe Rabbeinu asked the question, Bameh Torum Keren Yisrael. How is a Yid, how is a Jew going to be uplifted if so much of his time has to be spent with mundane gashmias, with day-to-day physical activities? How does a Jew then lift himself up and raise their level to come close to Hashem? And we find in the Sefer Pri Haaretz, brought down in Nesivos Shalom from Remendel Mivatets, Chusay Yagan Aleinu, and he says, famously, we've mentioned many times, that every hana, every pleasure that a person has in this world, even if it's legal pleasure, physical pleasures, things that you have to do to work, to make a living, all these things, but every pleasure that a person has in this world, even ones that are permissible, ones of gashmias, they separate a person from Hashem. It's just a metzias. It's a fact, and that's the way it goes. And once we say that, so the question is, what are we supposed to do? Moshe Rabbeinu is asking Hashem, you set up this world that we're so distracted from we can't just serve Hashem all day, seemingly. You set it up that we have all this physical activity. We have to do all those things. So how do we come back closer to Hashem? Bameh Toram Keren Yisrael. That is Moshe Rabbeinu's question. So to that, Hashem answered, B'ki Sisa. And what's the key? What's the word? What do we mean when we say by Kisisa? The Eitzah is v'nosnu, like the Parsha tells us, v'nosnu ish koifer nafshay l'Hashem. That every person has to give nafshay, to give your nefesh, your rotzain, your will to Hashem. And machzis hashekel, like we said, you're only giving a half a shekel. You know why it's half? Because half represents the idea that in everything that you do, we're talking now a little bit machshava, a little bit deep. Some people here I know will appreciate that. But in everything that you do, there are two parts. There's a machshava v'rotzain, every action that every person does. There's a machshava v'rotzain, your thought process, your will to do it. And then there's the actual maisa, when you go ahead and do the activity, you do the physical maisa. So the way to perfect your physical activities, your actions, which is the second part of what you do, the way to perfect that is to dedicate the first half, your machshava and your rotzain, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, Hashem created a world where we have to do seemingly so many mundane physical things, but you can change the entire look and feel of those actions and those things that you have to do by dedicating your machshava and your rotzain to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by dedicating your activities to Hashem. And what do we mean? Nesivos Shalom brings down from tzaddikim, he says, different tzaddikim tell us that one good way of doing all of this is to think before every action that you do, before you do a physical action, besides for thinking that I'm doing it for Hashem, a person should think that if this was not the will of Hashem, I would not do this. Think before everything, is what I'm about to do right now, is that what Hashem wants me to do right now? Is this the will of Hashem? And if you do that, a person's sitting down, a person's eating, a person's drinking, why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? I'm doing it because it's the will of Hashem that I should do it. Because Hashem wants me to do this. So you're mekadesh, you make the first part, the machshava v'rotzain, you make that first half, you dedicate that to Hashem, then the action that you do after that becomes Kodesh Kodashim. And that is alluded to in our mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel. When you do the first Machzis, you do the Machshava V'Ratzayin, now the other half, we're talking halves here, right? Now the other half, your physical actions, they're not drawing you away from Hashem like we thought. We thought that every physical action that you do draws you away from Hashem, but no, to the contrary. If you are doing it for Hashem, and you're doing it because it's the will of Hashem, then the entire action becomes ruchnius. The entire action becomes the will of Hashem. And that is what Hashem answered to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem answered to Moshe Rabbeinu, Bamet Torah Keren Yisrael. You know how? With ki Sisa, by uplifting. The word, by definition, means to uplift. Uplift your whole action for Hashem, and then you don't have to worry. Then everything that you do is dedicated to Hashem. The Gemara tells us, Masechta Pesachim, Daf Samaches Amud Beis, the Gemara says about Yom Tif, famously, people know this, that on Yom Tif you split Yom Tif Chetzi Lashem, v'Chetzi Lochem. So the Pashut Pshat in that is that people sometimes think that you indulge yourself, you eat, you drink, you be merry, and whatever. That's for, for Lochem, that's for you. And for Hashem, I'll go to Shul, maybe I'll say Advar Torah, and that's Hashem. But according to what we're saying with Nesivos Shalom, that Gemara, it's much, much deeper. Chetzi Lashem, v'Chetzi Lochem, that if you take the half of the Lochem, if you take that half, then no, that makes your whole action. That makes, if you make your Machshava V'Ratzon, the Lochem part, you have in mind that if it wasn't the will of Hashem for you to have this kind of Simchas Yom Tif, you wouldn't do it. If it wasn't the will of Hashem for you to make Kiddush on Yom Tif, for you to do other things on Yom Tif, then you would not do it. If you think about it that way, then the entire action becomes one of Ratzon Hashem. You're giving the whole thing over to Hashem, because when you think about your action, you're doing it because of the will of Hashem, then the eating and the drinking, everything, the Chetzi Lochem, all becomes a whole sum of the Chetzi Lashem. And all the activities that you do become one big Avodah, one big Avodas Hashem. The Pasuk says, at the end of Parshas Yisro, all the way at the end, the Pasuk says about Mizbeach Adama, the Mizbach Adama Taseli. Says the Nesivos Shalom, a beautiful word on this. What does it mean, Mizbach Adama? He says, even from the lowest, even from Mizbach Adama, even from the Adama Taseli, a person could lift up the thing which you might think is the most physical and the most down to earth. It's a Mizbeach, it's a Mizbach Adama, it's made out of earth. But Taseli, you could even make that for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the lesson that we have to learn really is that there's no such thing as wasting time, wasting activities. Moshe Rabbeinu asked, Bamet Torah Keren Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, how do we lift ourselves up? Hashem answered Moshe Rabbeinu, B'ki Sisa. Go about your business. Do what you have to do. But have Hashem in mind in everything that you do. And that's something that every single one of us can do. We could do it every day. We could do it when we eat. We could do it when we drink. We could do it when we meet people. We could do it when we're in business. We could do it with everything that we do. And just imagine getting schar for the physical activities that you do. Yes, you get schar because you do it because it's the will of Hashem. Let's all take that lesson. The lesson of Machzis HaShekel. We have 2 weeks to think about it. Parshas Ki Sisa. We have next week Shabbos Shkolim. Let's take that lesson and internalize it and use it, and every one of us will raise up all of our activities to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu.